And now on the line from Waterford is independent activist and former Mayor of Waterford, Seán Reinhardt. Seán, welcome to the programme.
Thanks for having me on. Thank you, Darren.
Seán, I got in touch with you on Monday of this week as I read the article that was in the Irish Times on Monday talking about what you had to say on the issue of drug-related intimidation in Waterford. Could you start off by telling our listeners today, Seán, a bit about your background first, please? And then could you tell us more about how you are finding the issue of drug-related intimidation in Waterford today?
Yeah, I'm a former councillor. I was a councillor for 8 years, and I was mayor of the Waterford City here. And people just approached me when they ran into difficulties. Families from different backgrounds across the social spectrum, and looked for help when they ran into trouble with owing money to people they had bought drugs from. And that's basically where my cases have come from, just people calling on me.
Okay, from what I've heard, the issue of illegal drugs and drug dealers and violence and intimidation has really evolved in Ireland over the last few decades. You are older than me, Seán, and you probably remember the late 70s and early 80s when heroin first became used in Ireland. Could you give me a bit of a summary, Seán, on how the situation with drugs has changed or evolved over the decades in your experience?
Yeah, I don't know why, but for some reason, cocaine is seen now as a sort of a cleaner option than heroin, and it sort of goes hand in hand with alcohol. I'm sure any of your listeners will experience it themselves. Going into a pub, if you go out to use a urinal, you can have 3 or 4 lads in a cubicle, and once there's some sort of a flat surface there, that's what they're usually up to, is taking cocaine. There used to be a time, as you said, back in the early 80s when, the heroin problem started, it would have been concentrated in working class areas, maybe on the north side of Dublin or whatever, and moved to places like Cork. But now the cocaine is absolutely everywhere. It's in every single town and village. And with that comes, of course, the whole cycle of, like, I wouldn't exaggerate the whole violent aspect to it, because it only empowers the perpetrators, But it does certainly happen. It's just the nature of the whole drugs business. It comes hand in hand. Like, if somebody owes money to a drug dealer and they get in debt with a drug dealer, they're not going to get a solicitor's letter from them. It's not dealt with that way. The violence doesn't have to be, it's not perpetrated on everybody, but they only need to sort of target one person, and that sends out a signal to everybody else. So it's that sort of vein of intimidation is there all the time.
Yeah, are you seeing much crack cocaine in Warford?
To be quite honest with you, I wouldn't be au fait with all the stuff that they'd use. You know what I mean? It's more or less, it's the same problem, regardless of what the actual drug is. The problem is the same regarding, how debts are incurred. Like, I don't like citing individual cases, because you can sort of identify somebody and they don't like attention being brought to themselves. But like the system, how it sort of worked, you have a young fella who could be at a party and somebody gives him some sort of a drug, something small in the whole realm of things. You might get a line of coke or something like that, and he thinks it's just like taking a cigarette from somebody. But then a week later, he'll get a knock on the door and somebody tells him, "You owe me 20 quid." And he's shocked and surprised. This could be a fella he could even be still in school. He could be in his leaving cert, anything like that. And then he gets a shock. He doesn't have that 20 quid. And next week, somebody different calls. And now they owe 40 quid because so-and-so had to come and collect it. And it spirals. And They might, when it's at that stage, they might tell a parent, they might tell a sibling, and it like of 100 quid, 200 quid, it's massive to a young fella. But normally in that situation, you get the family, and they can sort of rally around and try and sort things. It's when it becomes then, when it becomes somebody's like using drugs heavily, they may have to start then selling drugs themselves to their own circle of friends in order to pay for their habit. And then on the other side of things, in more affluent areas, it's not so much a money problem because they can afford the drug. It's simply a health problem. But in affluent areas, they have it manifests itself differently. They have a different way of dealing with it, and because it's easier for them to get help, to pay for healthcare, or to talk to employers that they might know in their own network, and to get somebody back on the straight and narrow. Not so simple in a working class area.
Yeah, you were saying that in the article in the Irish Times on Monday. It really is a lot worse in working class areas, the issue. And I saw a Rocktas committee meeting or something. I think they were saying it was yesterday. They were saying like a lot of disadvantaged areas there. I'm not saying they're out of control, but like as regards Gardaí, they're almost out of control. Like as regards Gardaí patrolling the areas, is that what you're seeing as well?
Well, look, you see, there's not an awful lot the Gardaí can do. And somebody's in that situation, they're not going to go to the Gardaí. Now, it's not necessarily a lack of trust to the Gardaí, but like it's what can they do? Do you know what I mean? They can't act as a go between a drug dealer and a user. Do you know what I mean? I just don't think that there's not an option there that can be pursued on those lines. It's not a runner for people. They can't contact the Gardaí. It'd be great if they could. And as I said, it's not a lack of trust, but it's not an option because they don't have the solution that the user would need.
Okay, just to talk a bit more about this. There was an article in the Northside People in Dublin this week about drug-related intimidation, and the journalist said that every Garda station in the country is supposed to have an inspector who deals with the issue of drug-related intimidation. Like, if the Gardaí if there were a lot more Gardaí in Ireland, a lot more, and do you not think it will make a difference? No.
No, I don't see how they can offer people who come forward how they can offer them protection. Quite frankly, I don't see how that would happen. No matter how many Gardaí you have, they're not going to give you be able to provide that protection. No disrespect to the service that they try to offer, but that is not a runner. That's why I think that we have to look at different options on how this whole thing can be handled, and we have to look at it not in a reactionary way, but in a mature way, so that there's a factual and reasonable debate on how this thing can be controlled or made the situation improved. Prohibition's never worked. It hasn't worked. We have alcohol is sold legally. And that causes untold problems. Cigarettes are sold legally. I think that it's something like 4,500 people die every year because of cigarettes. I just think that the drug dealers are a huge part of this equation. Gardaí are a huge part of the equation. The users are a huge part of the equation. The health service is a huge part. These are all variables in the equation. And I'm just saying, if we took the drug dealers and the Gardaí out of the equation, there's a lot of resources there that could be used in a different way. Now, I don't like. I'm to be honest, Darren, I'm half being the devil's advocate here, but it's we're going to have to look at alternatives and see, because it's definitely not getting any better. The situation is getting worse all the time, and there was a time when it was only confined to working class estates, and the establishment could turn their back on it, and it didn't matter. But it's not like that anymore. It's affecting every single family somewhere along the line. Somebody knows someone who's who's dabbling in cocaine.
So you'd be inclined to think that illegal drugs should be legalised?
Yeah, I think myself, if there is some sort of mechanism, and I'm not pretending to have the answers here, Darren, but this is what I'm saying we do need a debate for. I think if there was some sort of a mechanism so that people could access this habit through a different means, at least then, we'd know where the problem is, we'd know who has the problem, we'd know who to target precisely, and we wouldn't be wasting resources on a service that can't fix the problem.
There is a huge need. There is a huge lack of places for people who have addictions, isn't there? Like in treatment, like.
Well, that's another good reason not to be wasting money on stuff that doesn't work. It's needed elsewhere, and we have to try and get in and educate kids at an earlier stage. Because most of them don't learn their lesson until they're after already getting mixed up and stuff and having a big fall.
Okay, Seán, you've touched on a couple of policies there that could be brought in. Are there any other kind of policies in Ireland that would make your life and the communities of Waterford's lives in general a lot happier, looking at the bigger picture?
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's that whole thing. If we could remove that barrier of intimidation, and if we could get parents to have that conversation with their children at an earlier stage, so that kids can recognise a problem when it's coming up, and know the circle of friends they have and what direction they want to go in life. I mean, it's extremely difficult now with such a high rate of inflation, massive rents. All of these things contribute to this situation. You have people. I said this before. It's like living in 6 foot of water and you're 5'11" high, and you want to keep jumping up to get that breath of air every now and then. And that sort of desperation, it leads people to want some sort of escape, and that's where they find it. And they need that break because financial hardship is not conducive to trying to sort situations like this. And I think myself, this whole situation that we find ourselves in, I know they call it a housing crisis, but as far as I'm concerned, it's not simply a crisis, it's a policy. And I don't think we're in this position regarding high rents by accident. It's a deliberate policy. It's not just a bad policy, it's a deliberate policy. And it's happened and made the lives of so many people much, much worse. And kids now, the young couples and the like, that ambition even to own a home is being taken away from them. So they're losing that whole grasp of living and buying into a secure life. That's being taken away from them by the government.
And when you're saying it's a deliberate policy in housing, do you mean like kind of vulture funds buying apartments and stuff like?
Yeah, I mean, like when the bottom falls out of the market, they won't lend money to ordinary people. Do you understand me? When a house can be bought cheaply, they'll sell it to them. They'll give them the money when it's expensive, and then when the arse falls out of things, what do? They take the houses off people and buy them back themselves, dirt cheap. I don't think any of this happens by accident. It's a plan, like, and that's how they yo-yo us in and out of these recessions.
You're talking about the banks here, or the government as well?
Banks and the government, yeah. I mean, it's all the establishment who do this, and it's always the same people who foot the bill.